the podcast located at 610ESPN.com and now on iTunes. And Happy New Year, everyone. Wishing you the best for 2020. We've got great shows and events lined up for the new year, so keep tuning in. And speaking of great shows, my first guest of 2020 is Matt Murray of Iron Trap Garage in Boyertown, Pennsylvania. I first encountered Matt from one of his videos, this particular video about a 1927 Packard sitting in a factory for almost 40 years. The video has now over 1 million views. It's great stuff, and we'll talk about his YouTube channel and his amazing garage space. But first, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited.
Now, you are a hot rod builder, basically doing what people in the 50s did with cars from the 30s. Now, I call it old school or vintage builds. Is that accurate? Is that the name of it, or what you would call it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the coined phrase is traditional hot rod, is what most people use. But basically, we're using old parts to build old cars the way they would have done it in the heyday of hot rodding, as I call it, which is like 1964 and earlier.
Now, your garage and your techniques are it's a bit like a time warp, only with the advantage of having the internet. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, and we'll talk about how that plays a role in what you do. But let's find out about Matt. Where are you from? What are some of your earliest memories of cars?
Yeah, so I'm actually was born and raised in my hometown and where I'm at today, Boyertown, Pennsylvania. Moved away for a little while, but came back because it's just a cool old town, and basically my dad was wrenching on cars, mechanic his whole life, and I was around cars my whole life. My dad was more of a big block Ford fan, so when I was a kid he was putting like FEs and big blocks in like his pickup truck he would drive to work every day. And my dad was more of a make it fast for a daily driver, but it was just make it run good. It didn't have to look good. And so I was exposed as a kid of my dad just like swapping engines in the garage, and I'm sitting there watching him, and like as a kid, my dad running out of fuel because he's taking me to kindergarten because his truck had a big block and it got like 4 miles to the gallon, and we'd run out of gas, so we'd have to push the truck into the gas station. So like I just been around the grassroots car building my whole life. Good times.
Well, most of us, when we look at a pile of metal parts and metal bits and things like that, we don't see much. But to someone like you with a trained eye, it might be a stack of vintage treasures. How did you learn about all of the things? I know you mentioned in our pre-interview, our earlier conversation, that you don't have formal training in it. How did you learn about, how do you know what's in a box of metal bits?
Yeah, I always tell people that like with the buying and selling and hunting for old parts, you don't have to be the guy in the room with the most money or in the building with the most money. You have to be the guy with the most knowledge. And knowledge is power, and it's worth more than any money could be. So I just spent a lot of time reading old magazines and asking questions from guys older than me, or if I saw something at a car show or a swap meet that was unusual, or if it was priced really high, well, what is that? What makes it special? And then the guy will educate you, and then I know that if I'm in a barn, in Virginia with no reception, I remember that, put it in my memory. So a lot of it was me when I didn't have money and I was younger, just learning about the stuff and reading about it. And I mean, since I was a kid, I was reading National Geographic, looking at these like treasure hunts and guys diving deep in the sea for treasure. Mm-hmm. And that's what I always joke, this is my modern day treasure hunting. So I
was looking at other stuff in the National Geographic magazines, but that's another story. And we can talk about, we can't talk about Iron Trap Garage first without talking about the name. Yep. And of course the space itself. Where does the name come from?
So the name was basically, years ago, it was kind of just, like everybody does, you make a username that you use on forums, and before social media was as big as it is now, I was like, I need to make a new username that represents whatever. So I was kind of just researching terms that I was thought of, and I found the term iron trap just by like Googling stuff, and basically that it means a trap that you cannot get out of. It's like a medieval trap, but what I related that to is that's what this hobby is. It's when you get into this hobby, it is it's a trap that you can't get out of. So like when you get into it, I say you die with this hobby, because 90% of the guys and gals that get into this, you get so passionate about it, you take it to your grave, you're still, I know so many guys that can barely walk and they're still hunting for parts and work tinkering on cars because you're so passionate. So that's where it came from. It's like it's a trap you get into, and it's with you forever.
And you were saying that most of your friends are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and that's who you hang out with. And you're not even 40 yet. I want to make that clear to our listening audience. So this is a young guy hanging out, getting, absorbing the wisdom of this older crowd because you're in a sort of a niche hobby, and that's how you learn about a lot of this stuff too.
Yeah. Most of my most of the guys I hang out with regularly are guys that are in their mid 60s all the way up to their 90s, and I have some friends that are literally in their 90s. They're still doing this. I'm friends with a guy named Gene Winfield that's a famous customizer. He literally called me yesterday on the phone, and we're talking about swap meets we're doing and cars we're building, and he's 93 I think right now. And
he's the American Graffiti, the Pharaohs guy. Is he related to the Pharaohs Club out in California?
No,
okay.
But he's actually the one that started the Fade paint job, which is really famous in custom cars, and he did a lot of movie vehicles that were famous. I've gotten to be friendly with him, and when you talk to him, he's almost his mid-90s, and he's still painting cars, traveling the world, literally doing what I do. So we've been to junkyards together in swap meet. He came out to Hershey with me in his 90s, and we're walking to swap meet trying to beat each other for parts. So it's like, so many of these guys I know, like I said, it's something that you keep with you and keeps you going, as you get older.
And we talked a little bit, again, previously about how Pennsylvania is super hot spot. I mean, as you said, it's better than California, and tell us why.
Yeah, so I think Southern, as far as the stuff that I'm into, Southern California was definitely the hotbed where all this started for the most part. But I think nowadays, Southern California, there's such a high concentration of guys that are into it that a lot of it's been picked. It's harder to find. Whereas here in the Northeast, I think number one, because we had the Hershey swap meet, so many guys became career swap meeters where they were. Hershey was how you made half your income for the year, Hershey and Carlisle. So you get all these guys that were buying in great quantity, and they have buildings full, and there's barns, and there's still areas in the Northeast that aren't that haven't been turned into developments. So you can find a 100-acre farm with 10 buildings, and there's 50, 70 cars and thousands of parts. So because of that, we're still finding stuff, and I'm still impressed. I mean, even like we mentioned, the Packard, right in the middle of Philadelphia, there's an antique car that's sitting that you would think everything's been found in Philly, but it's still around. I'm still getting calls about stuff that's in the city, and you're like, really? I can't believe it.
Right. For a while, I was wondering how can the show American Pickers keep going? Haven't they overturned every single barn find? But and they love coming to the East Coast because, as you say, there's tons of stuff hidden in barns, and we'll talk about a little bit later how you find that stuff, and a lot of that is obviously word of mouth. Tell us a little bit about the space, because to me it's magical. As I mentioned, I don't think Disneyland could build something. If you're building a set for a car show or something like that, they couldn't build something that looks as good as that. And I think the appeal of that has a lot to do with, we'll certainly have more than 50,000 subscribers now on YouTube, and I think that it's just an amazing, magical place. I went there the other day, and you can't smell it on YouTube, but it just has a feel and a smell to it that is unbelievable. The stone walls. Tell us a little bit how you found that place and what it meant to you when you found it.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, I was shopping for a house with a garage on site, and I knew I wanted something that was special. I was really heavily into the antique cars, but I was living in a rancher with a 2.5 car garage, and it just didn't have what I was looking for. So I was looking at old barn, old farmettes and things like that with old barns to restore, but I was finding a lot of them were a little too rough. And I just stumbled across this property that an estate was selling, and they had just dropped the price, and it was actually right in the middle of my hometown. I'm like, I don't want to live in town. I'm building old cars. People are going to complain. And I went there, and it was in an old part of town. So my house was built in 1930. The shop was built in 1947 and is an airplane hangar. So it was actually built like a bank barn. So it has a field stone walls that are actually sunken into the ground like the first floor of an old bank barn would be, but the roof is flat. But whoever built it originally, I'm still kind of researching the property. They put huge I-beams in the ceiling that are like something you would see on the Ben Franklin Bridge. I mean, they're massive. They overbuilt it.
Right.
And the building is so massive with no beams in the center to block you, so it's an open floor plan.
Right.
And real high ceilings. And I looked in the window when I went to look at the property and called my real estate agent and said, I'll take it. He's like, you didn't even look at the house. I said, it doesn't matter. I
Wow.
can fix a house. This garage is it. And we, within 2 days we had an offer. And I've only been there about I think 4 years, and it looks like I've been there for 60 because of how much stuff goes on in there. It's like you said, it has that smell and feel when you walk in.
It's amazing, and I've gotten more comments. I posted a picture of us on social media. A lot of people commenting on the space.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. And then you added, sort of vintage signage, and you have a friend who's an electrical engineer. It all worked out just perfectly, it seems, for you.
Yeah, it was just kind of one of those things that I always say networking is your best friend. So, I have friends that do all kinds of different stuff. We help each other out. So my best friend, Mike, he does electrical, so he came and redid the electric in the place, and friend of a friend did heat, and we had a heater put in, and it was within a month or two it was a workable space, and we were building cars. And that's basically when we started the channel. It was months after I moved in. Mike said, we need to do something, this place is killer. And I'm like, all right, let's do it.
Right. So, and we'll get more into the YouTube channel, but it came as a result of this space. Really,
Yes.
It's so photogenic and perfect, and the lighting is amazing now, and it just it really catches your eye. And if you want to see it, go to Iron Trap Garage. Just go to the YouTube and search Iron Trap Garage, and he's got a number of great videos on there. A lot of them start. The opening obviously is in the garage, and then sometimes you're in the garage, or sometimes you're out on the road doing stuff like that. Your garage, though, is generally not for hire. You're not working for other people. You're doing your own stuff.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I was kind of following in my dad and my brother's footsteps, doing the mechanic thing, working in the shop. And I very quickly realized that was not my thing. I get burnt out real easy working on other people's stuff. To me, building custom cars and hot rods and customs it's very much a creative process. I say it's just like a sculptor, where you want to have 100% control to do what I want. So I don't generally do side work. Every now and then I'll do a small rust repair job, or a guy will bring something in and I'll do it, or whatever. But I found that a lot of times I warn those guys, it's going to take a while because it's not interesting to me.
Right.
So I try not to do that, and that was what we try to do with the Iron Trap Garage, with the channel, and also buying and selling parts. There's definitely a value that I can make money into finding these parts and uncovering them and selling them to guys to build cars. So that's the way I can make some money by doing that, and that's my workaround for not having to work on other people's stuff.
And spreading the love as it was.
Yes.
Let's talk about your logo. I thought it was a Christmas. When I first saw it, I thought it was a Christmas tree, but it's not. It's a pagoda, some kind of Japanese pagoda, because you have the actual photograph on your Instagram account. Tell us a little bit about the logo of Iron Trap Garage.
So basically, one of the first cars that I finished that people kind of recognized is a car that I call the Pagoda City Coupe, and I'm Berks County, born and raised, and pretty much an icon of Berks County and the Reading area is the Reading Pagoda. So I've been going to Pagoda since I was a kid. I've been enamored with it. It's just so neat. And then again, I'm into history, and you read the history of the place and how it changed hands and all this different stuff that happened through World War II. It almost got torn down because there was people that associated with Japan, and it somehow survived. So that's always been my place since I could drive. Anytime I build a custom car, the thing you did on your put a done stamp on it is I drive it to Pagoda and I take a picture of my car in front of Pagoda. So I have photos from cars I built since I was 17. So the Pagoda City Coupe, when I bought that body, the gentleman I bought it from said that the car was from Berks County, new, the Model A, and it would pass through hands and never left Berks County. I live in Berks County, I bought it from him, he lived in Berks County, and his friend that found it in a barn, the whole story, so I named it the Pagoda City Coupe. Wow. And when we were making a logo, we took that car and that photo I took and turned it into a logo. So yeah, if you're not familiar with the pagoda, you might think it's a Christmas tree, but I don't actually mind that, because once you start to learn about it, you understand it. And I mean, if somebody looked at the Nike logo first, they'd be like, what is that weird little thing? You don't have to understand it from first, but once you buy into it, I think it makes sense.
It's distinctive, and once you see it enough times, you go, oh, that's Iron Trap.
Yeah, exactly.
Iron Trap.
Yep.
Well, we're going to take a little break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about Matt's specific projects. How does he decide which one takes priority, and just how does he manage his time between work and hobby and driving around the state? Right after these messages on CarSmarts Radio.